Hi, this is probably a bad idea, but I'm going to make a video about Dissociated and how their content harmed me and how their content has harmed the DID community as a whole, from what I've seen in my own experiences. And a lot of this is going to seem nitpicky, but it's just everything together that makes a really bad combination for people who are vulnerable. And I've reached a breaking point with people recommending them to learn about DID when they don't actually represent the disorder very well. Many other systems that I've spoken to or interacted with have had similar opinions, and I'm not saying that they are a total scourge of the community or deserve to fail or anything like that. I'm just wanting to get some of this information out there because it is something that I think would have helped me in the past. So I'll start with my own story and then go to what I've seen in the community. So I learned about Dissociated from Anthony, and Anthony's video. I'm sure you all know what happened last year. And I took an interest in it. I knew I had CPTSD, and so it was just kind of like relieving. That's not the right word, but I felt less alone watching her videos. I was like, oh, okay. And as I watched more, I realized that some of the things I was experiencing weren't normal things, and so I started to realize, like, oh my goodness, do I have this too? And I do. I've been diagnosed, and I am currently in treatment for DID. So I am grateful for learning about it, and that's about it. Honestly, like, sorry, that sounds pretty harsh, but like, it's done some damage to me and my recovery, and obviously not all of this is Dissociated's fault. I was already in a very vulnerable place, but also they have an awareness of, hey, I need to be talked to delicately and handled. It's a very difficult thing to handle. DID is it's a very delicate disorder. But she doesn't carry that same energy for protecting her audience. There is no information really about how to cope with certain symptoms of the disorder. And I'm not saying that like they needed to talk about these things, because like it's difficult. But they presented themselves as a resource for people with DID, when in reality, they are a resource for people without DID to learn about DID. So the way this affected me was, I feel like, I had to accept, like, oh my goodness, I'm experiencing all these things. And I had no idea what to do with it. I was getting into some more difficult topics here, so if like self-harm and stuff is triggering for you, please stop watching. But I was self-harming. I was scared I was going to end my life, and these are things that I experienced, like suicidal ideation and stuff like that. Like, I've experienced that my whole life. It wasn't anything new, but I had been telling myself, like, oh, this is like just a game, like, it doesn't really make sense. But, I minimized it and didn't acknowledge it as real. And then suddenly I had to acknowledge all this is real. But then the only information they have about actually taking care of yourself with DID is journaling. And with that, they don't talk about flooding or the fact that journaling can like lead to more stress. There's such a thing as too much journaling. Really before communication, you need to focus on safety and grounding. And I don't know, it's just the fact that they don't talk about flooding at all just really blows my mind. Flooding is like an overwhelming amount of like sensations or like flashbacks coming back and just feeling like emotionally just, I'm flooded. Yeah. And the fact that they don't talk about that at all blows my mind. Another thing was even with figuring out like, oh my goodness, I relate to this. I felt like I was faking because my parts weren't so clear. You know, they seem to always know who's fronting and who this is and who that is. And when we're in reality, DID is just like, this isn't for everyone, but it's from my own experience. Like, I don't know who I am a lot of the time. It's really, everything's just kind of blurry. Especially since, you know, doing too much with the journaling. It actually kind of sucks. I literally have trauma surrounding journaling. Like, I cannot get my parts to work with me because they're so afraid of doing the wrong thing for myself again. Which just, I mean, that sucks. And the parts about, you know, they had such distinct parts, and they were saying like, oh, you know, parts can have different relationships and like all this stuff. And basically I was under the impression that like each alter was going to have their own life, and like, no, I am one person as a whole. You know, of course everything's like chopped up, but like that caused serious distress for me. I am going to cover how they have negatively affected the DID community and the mental health community as a whole. As far as the mental health community, they do not talk about any overlap in disorders. So basically it's this is very like a condensed version, but if you dissociate, if you age regress, it's DID. You know, when there are several things that are so similar, like BPD is very similar. There's so many like overlapping symptoms, and you know, there's splitting in BPD, which I don't have BPD, so I'll leave that for someone else to explain or for you to do your own research. But from my understanding, it's a very similar experience to switching, and like can show up in a very similar way. So this has led to tons of armchair diagnosing and self-diagnosis when it's really not what's going on. The armchair diagnosing, someone with BPD shared that basically like, because of Dissociated's videos and the overlap in symptoms, their friend was like, hey, I think you have DID. Who's fronting? Who's fronting? And it's like, that is, you know, it's affecting people on an individual level, you know? Like, especially, like, you shouldn't ask that to a system without their consent, without having spoken about boundaries first and foremost. But also, especially since they didn't even have the disorder and didn't even relate to it, you know, it's just, it's invasive. But also think about like the Trisha situation. She probably watched Dissociated's videos and was like, oh my goodness, I relate to this, because she has BPD. And it isn't talked about very much on like, no, Trisha should not have made the videos and definitely not responded to the criticism by trolling. I am not condoning any of that. But I understand her initial video. I understand why she thought she had DID, because Dissociated does not cover that these symptoms are parts of other disorders as well. And then okay, carrying that into the DID community, their advice on how to engage with systems is not really the best. Their content has led, I've seen people like asking like, oh, hey, I see you're in a committed relationship, but can I date one of your alters? Which is wildly inappropriate. And there have been people asking like, who's fronting and all this stuff, trying to be accommodating. And it's really invasive. Not everyone with DID is going to want to talk about their alters and everything because it is so personal. Each one is formed because of trauma in some way, either to compensate for the fact that they can't handle the trauma, or, it's all just very, very deep personal stuff. It's and to like, and I know where these people are coming from. They're wanting to be like, hey, I want to make sure you're comfortable. And, so it's like, I don't blame them. It's just frustrating. And all of these things would not be so bad if Dissociated did not silence everyone that tried to speak out about it. I don't think I would have had such a bad time if there were comments saying, hey, this is not exactly what I've experienced. But all of those comments get deleted or filtered out. And when you're a mental health education channel, it is really important to be able to have these conversations to either, it's not fun having people disagree with you, but also like it could help protect someone. They're not coming from nowhere. And like, there have been several people that have tried to share their stories and speak out about it. And everyone has been either minimized because they're a hater, or some people have been bullied off the internet for trying to speak out about it and saying, hey, this does not represent me. And that is horrible, and it's just so hard watching people recommend them when like they make a circus show out of our disorder. Like they fetishize the disorder. A lot of the comments on their stuff is like, oh my God, I love Kyle. Oh, wow, Nina could stomp on me. And like, you can't control those kinds of comments, but those are the ones she interacts with. And then you'll see people asking like, oh, hey, this is really helpful to me. Like, how do I deal with this? And nothing, and of course, sometimes they get answered, but like, their intentions are not in the place of helping people with DID. That's all I'm trying to say, because there are good and bad things about their channel. Some of it's good, but people don't realize, because there's so much truth woven in with the bullshit, really, that like you can't tell the difference, and that's scary to me. Okay, I think I've covered everything, and I realize each of these points individually may seem kind of like nitpicky. It's just like everything together creates a really dangerous situation, and with the moderated comments and everything, people don't really have an idea of, hey, there could be something wrong, or this could not be helpful for you. So it's just everything together. And if anyone has their own experiences, feel free to share in the comments, or, anything like that. Or even if you disagree with me, like, go ahead. I'm just sharing my own experiences with it, what I've noticed. So, yeah, I don't know. That's the video.